Hi everyone, Stepan here. I'm going to show you my round 4 game from the Vrsar Open. So this was the afternoon round on day 3 of the tournament. In the morning I played round 3 and I drew from a -5 position with black. I completely outplayed my opponent in the opening and then had a winning position, played well, but then, dropped my advantage. So round 3 was a long game, and going into round 4, I wanted to play a good game, I wanted to convert my advantage, and I got paired against a FIDE master. So in the first 3 rounds, I scored 2 out of 3, and I had 2 draws and the win. So I'm playing a FIDE master rated about 2050, because he is 60 now, and I'm pretty sure he came to the tournament to sell merchandise and books. He also played the Pula Open, and he had his stand with books there too. So I'm sure he, hasn't been training hard recently. In any case, I played d4. He plays a lot of things, as does every FIDE master. c4, g6, knight c3, bishop g7. I played e4, he played d6, and here I played bishop e2. The reason I played, bishop e2 is because if my opponent castles now, goes into the King's Indian, I wanted to play something very aggressive and play the semi-Averbach with bishop e3 and g4. But he transposes to the Benoni here with c5. If you're looking for a more effective way to learn openings, try out Chessbook. It's a great tool for studying openings. It's very easy to use. It focuses on moves that people actually play. It explains the plans in certain positions, and it's going to highlight the mistakes you made in your games. So once you connect your lichess and chess.com accounts, it's going to focus on the mistakes you actually make. So you're going to be able to work on what matters most. You can import your repertoire either by hand or by importing a PGN, so that's easy. Let's say save my progress, and you can then practice those moves. So if you go to, let's say, your black repertoire, you can see that mine is 89% complete. You can press import and you can use any of the PGNs I've prepared. You can find a bunch of them in the link description, in the description below. So import the repertoire, and then you can start practicing it. So for example, if we go d4, d5, you can also have a bunch of pre-made repertoires from this position, and some of them are mine. I have created a Queen's Gambit declined opening repertoire for black, so you can start with that. I have created an e4, e5 full repertoire for black, and I have created the London system repertoire for white, and you can access them through Chessbook easily. So once again, once you connect your lichess and chess.com accounts, you're going to be able to correct your opening mistakes. So, for example, in this case, I play h6 in the tile, and let's see what mistake I'd made. So in this position, you played e6, play the correct move on the board. Wait, what's the move? I think I should go bishop e4. No? And here, this is a good example. I don't know. Show me the answer. Queen e6 check. Yes. Okay. Damn. So you see what I'm talking about. I made the mistake in the game, and then once again, when I was reviewing it on Chessbook, I didn't know what to do. You can also practice all the moves in your repertoire, which is obviously one of the most useful things you can do. You can play through model games in your openings. You're going to get served games daily. And you can view performance by opening, which will be there once you complete your repertoire. Check out Chessbook by following the link in the description below. It's only $8 a month, even less if you pay yearly, and I hope you like it. And I have no problem playing against the Benoni, I love it. So d5. And in this position, black's most common is to castle, knight f3, and then e6 takes, c takes, and we get the typical Benoni structure. And having a bishop on e2, in my personal opinion, is very good in the Benoni, even though bishop d3 is one of the main ways to develop the bishop. But the bishop on e2 helps, because in many cases, after my opponent played e6, I played knight f3, takes, takes, castles, castles. My opponent played bishop g4. And white's worst fear is to give up this knight for the bishop, because that way you have no control over the e5 square. I shouldn't really play h3 here. h3 may seem like a playable move. Unfortunately, after h3 there is b5. And on knight b5 I lose the pawn. On bishop b5 I, could lose the game after knight e4, knight e4, queen a5. And obviously I didn't want to go into any of that. So I just castled. And now why is having the bishop on e2 beneficial? After bishop g4, I go knight d2. And the strategy in the Benoni involves, white playing for the e5 square and ideally playing e5 at some point to create a passed pawn on the d file. So saving this knight is essential. I don't really care about the bishops. I mean, this is black's bad bishop, if we're going to be honest, and black wishes to exchange it no matter which piece I offer it for. However, while knight d2 is an excellent idea, and despite black, getting to trade these bishops, the knight's going to land on c4, increasing control over e5 and allowing the move f4 in the future. So this is a sort of dream scenario in the classical Benoni, and this has been played many times. At this point I was pretty comfortable and I knew the position. So queen e2. He played rook e8. Now, I played a move that has never been played before, because I couldn't, remember the theory here. Most people play either f3 or knight c4, but there have only been a handful of games. I played rook e1, which is perfectly fine. I just want to support my pawn. I'm not afraid of knight d5 yet, because, my knight defense, I don't have to lose my queen. Then he played knight a6. And if I make a normal move here, like, for example, knight c4, I was afraid of b5. And, of course, on knight b5, there's knight e4. I don't want to go into that. So I played the move queen d1, which I think is a good move. The engine says black has a slight advantage now. So queen d1 isn't precise, but my idea was to prevent b5, because now if b5, I just take it. And, there's nothing here. Knight e4 doesn't work. Whereas here, without the queen, the knight can take on e4, and obviously my pieces aren't really defending well. In short, I need my knight on d2 still. But when I play queen d1, my knight is free to move. Okay, knight c7, this prepares b5, so I have to defend. a4, preventing b5. My opponent played knight d7, playing for the e5 square, and now I'm really proud of this maneuver. What I did here is I want to control e5, but I want to do it in a way that develops my bishop. I want to play f4 in a favorable position. So I invited my opponent to play knight e5 by playing knight c4, and when he did, of course I don't want to trade, I played knight e3. And now the knight is a tempo gain. After f4, I'm going to chase the knight away, bring my knight back to c4, and I will have technically gained the tempo. So a6, still fighting for b5. In the Benoni, b5 is black's dream pawn break. It's still under my firm control. However, now I get to play f4, and the knight must head back. And now when I play knight c4, there is no more knight e5, and e5 is coming. Okay, so at this point, I thought I was significantly better. The engine says plus 0.2, so I wasn't. And of course the d6 pawn is hanging, so black must do something about that. My opponent threw in bishop d4. I didn't want to go bishop e3, firstly because I wanted to keep my bishop. I didn't want to trade, and secondly because there's a very concrete line starting with queen f6. So if bishop e3, queen f6, bishop d4, c takes, that's no good. I didn't want to go into that. It should be fine, but I played king h1, which is also fine. And now my opponent must save the pawn. And if you turn on the engine here, there's only one move. The move I had deemed unplayable. Knight f8 is too passive. If knight f8, then I can just go a5, completely dominating the b6 square. And the only move that makes any sense is knight f6, but this now allows the thematic e5. And if you've seen any of Tyle's games in these structures, you will know that e5 takes and d6 is the way to play here. So e5. And there was one line that worried me. Obviously, black must take once, because if they don't, I'll just take on d6. For example, if you know, knight takes d5, then knight d5, knight d5, knight d6 seems very good to me. White should have an advantage. So my opponent took once. Okay, d takes e5, and now of course if I take back I just lose material, so d6. And I have this Benoni / Grunfeld passed pawn on the d file, which is a huge asset. And I was worried about ef4 here, and I didn't know what to do against it. I would have had to calculate a long while. I spent maybe 20 minutes calculating e5, not because of this, not because of what my opponent did. My opponent played knight cd5, which is almost losing, but because of e takes f. And here my calculation went dc7, rook e1, queen e1, queen c7. Who's better here and why? I have no idea. I mean, now I do, I engine check the game, but during the game, or actually before playing e5 on move 20, this is move 23, I just couldn't evaluate this properly. Let's say I play something like knight e4, of course rook e8 is losing to knight takes f6, but knight h5, and what now? This was completely unclear to me. There could also be knight g3 sacrifices in the future. I just didn't like this. Or I couldn't assess it. Now the engine says equal, but only one move keeps white equal, knight g5. Everything else runs into rook e8 basically, or queen c6. So something like knight g5, queen d7, which I don't even understand, but this should be equal, but it's definitely too much for me. In any case, on d6, my opponent played knight dc5, and I was really happy here. Now I can exchange, take on e5, and in my mind, this was a winning position. Now he played b5, I played queen f3, and here he played the losing move. Obviously, if bc, then queen d5, that was my idea, but that's the best way to play. That's the best way to play. If bc5, queen d5, this is a slight edge for white, which seems absolutely crazy to me. Something like queen d7, bishop g5 should be a slight edge. I mean, okay, but it seemed very good to me. It seemed very good to my opponent as well, so he didn't do that. He played the losing move, knight b4. And, you know, white to play and win. Find it, if you can. Pause the video. The win is actually very simple. You take on b5, a takes b5, you take on a8, queen takes a8, and d7. That's it. Let's say rook d8, queen a8, rook a8, e6, I'm breaking through, I'm gonna queen. There's no stopping my knight, my pawns, my bishop. You cannot control e7 and d8. That's the end of the game. The engine says +7. However, instead of that, I played what I thought was a really smart tempo move, rook f1. After rook f1, the position is equal again. But it's equal only if my opponent takes the knight, which I thought led to mate. It does not lead to mate. My opponent blundered with f5 here, and from here I did not drop my advantage anymore. f5 is a very human move. I mean, what else do you do? Queen d7 runs into knight b6. You basically have to keep defending b6 and f7. If you go rook f8, I mean, you may as well resign, because I take on b5 and go bishop h6, and then I'll just take on f7. I could go bishop h6 immediately, actually. So he played f5. The way to hold on is incredibly dangerous. bc, allowing queen f7, okay, fine. The engine says +0.8, so technically an engine could win, but it's not a crushing advantage. King h8 only move, and now bishop h6, fine. The only move to prevent mate is either rook g8 or bishop e5. If rook g8, I go rook e1, I guess either rook. And then I go e6, and you know, d7 and e6, and this seems crushing. The engine says plus 0.6, so it's not crushing at all. But bishop e5 is a more human way to play, and this is losing. Rook e1, you have to save the bishop, I guess. So bishop d4, but now rook e7 leads to mate in 6. You have to take, there's no way to defend h7. Takes, d takes, you have to defend mate, so queen g8. But now simply queen g8, rook g8, and rook f8, and that's it. I'm gonna queen next move. So the way to draw after bc4, queen f7, king h8, bishop h6 was rook g8. That seemed... I got this far before playing rook f1, and I just thought I'm winning here. I'm not winning. In any case, my opponent did not want to lose the f7 pawn, so he played f5. But yeah, now I have the same tactic. So AB, rook a8, queen a8, and now I chose the complicated way to win. I was under a minute at this point, or I had maybe a minute or two, and I saw d7, but I also saw queen takes a8, and I played queen a8, which is a more difficult win for no reason at all. When I played queen a8, you could feel his relief. And, well, actually I did let my advantage slip. It was equal at many points after this. So d7 would have been a clean conversion. Obviously, if queen f3 I take on e8 with check. The engine says bc4 is the only move. I don't know. If rook d8, I just exchange queens and go e6 or knight b6. So takes, and now there are many ways to win, but e6 is probably the simplest. I don't know. The engine gives knight b6, rook d8, and then e6. And after bishop f6, bishop f4, followed by bishop c7. But instead of that, I played queen takes, rook takes, and knight b6, which according to the engine is equally good, but I messed up here. So my opponent played rook b8, and I played d7. And I thought my opponent couldn't take on e5 because of rook e1, knight c1, and rook e8. Unfortunately, it wasn't that simple. The easiest way to win was e6. After e6, whatever you do, I'm just going to queen, I don't know, rook b6, e7, king f7, rook e1, and that's it. But I played d7, which is crazy. Of course, my opponent doesn't take the knight, he takes the pawn. And now, you know, it's still +1, but I have to win the game again. I thought I was completely winning, but it turned out to be more complicated than that. Rook e1, knight c6 defends the bishop, and knight c8. This was my idea, simply blocking access to d1. Bishop c7. I was threatening to take on e5 and queen, so my opponent needs to defend d8. Bishop g5. Okay, now threatening rook e8. So my opponent played rook a8, and that hangs mate. So I don't really have enough time to queen, so I played g3. I played g3 and not h3 because I wanted to avoid getting mated on h2. I don't think h2 is a move at all. h3 is a move at all. h6. Okay, I took. Bishop d8, a smart pawn sacrifice by my opponent, distracting my bishop. Bishop f4, king f7, bishop d6. Okay, still a +1 advantage to white, but you know, I'm not just queening, I'm not overwhelming my opponent. Okay, good counterplay. Bishop f4, g5, bishop d6, and here my opponent had a chance to be equal. I would say in practical play, with both of us being under a minute at this point, perhaps black would have been more than equal. And the way to do that is, of course, b4. And now my opponent has a very dangerous passed pawn. Now I want to throw in knight d6 check, so probably bishop c5, c3, takes, knight d6, and I would have gone for a draw here. This I found without doing any analysis. I'm threatening to take, and if king f6 I go knight e8, and king f7, knight d6, and so on. And if king g6 I go rook e6, and I pick up the pawn. Something like, you know, king h7, knight f5. I don't know. I don't think black should allow this. I think black needs to repeat. However, my opponent did not play b4. He played bishop f6, which isn't as good, and now this gives me time to cover the second rank with rook e2, rook a1, king g2, and here he played g4, which makes very little sense to me. I guess he wanted to restrict my king, but it doesn't really work. So I played bishop f4. I want to gain access to d6. I also want to prevent bishop g5. Okay, b4 finally. Apparently, black was still fine with rook d1. Rook d1, knight d6 check, king g6, knight b5, rook d7, and I'm not going to win that. I've lost my d7 pawn. Of course, neither of us with under a minute could calculate properly at this point. So he plays b4, and now I saw the win. Now I'm finally winning, and there are no more tricks. Knight d6 check, king g6. Other moves were possible, but would have made no sense. Knight takes c4, no counterplay, and also no rook d1. He played knight d4, attacking my rook. I just played bishop e5, and this is the end of the game. If you take my rook, I'm going to take the bishop and queen. There are no mates. My king has f2. He played knight f3. Again, there are no mates because rook g1 check, king f2, and you run out of checks. So I took on f6 and my opponent resigned. Obviously, there's no way to prevent me from queening anymore. If you go rook d1, I can go knight d2. I can go rook d2. I can just queen. I can do whatever. I'm winning 5 different ways. So not a clean win. And I would say that in this position, I should have taken more out of my, very low clock time to decide to go d7, because it's a full tempo. I ended up playing d7 2 moves later, investing a move. d7 here is for free. So if you can play a forcing tempo move, it's probably the best move. And there's no downside to d7 here. I just would have been a tempo up compared to all those variations, which in this case means then that black isn't taking on e5, and that I'm playing e6 after the rook moves. Like here, if for example bc4, I don't even take the rook. I just go e6, and that's it. You cannot take the pawn. You cannot move the rook. If you play, let's say, rook b8, then here. Game over. So I think I played a very good middle game and got a winning advantage, but my conversion wasn't clean. Still, I won the game, and after 4 rounds, I had 2 wins and 2 draws, 3 out of 4, and I beat a FIDE master, so I was happy. And next day we only had 1 round, which is always a relief. The next day I played against an IM, Predrag Bodiroga, whom I've faced before and drew him in 2021. So you're going to see that game tomorrow. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you got something from this Benoni game. Stay tuned for more chess. Bye-bye.